Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Well, welcome back. Not every day you get to interview your own son, and I get to do that today. Our oldest son, former State Senator Jason Atkinson, on a couple of issues. The first one is, you probably have seen and read in the news that he's been now serving on a commission with the Oregon State Fish and Wildlife Commission. I want to talk to him about that, and then we'll get into his movie, but good to see you.
Nice to see you on a new set.
Well, yeah, thank you. What is your job as Commissioner of Oregon Fish and Wildlife?
Well, you know, the job is, it's like a board of directors. The commission works directly for the people of Oregon, but it also is the watchdog of the agency to make sure that the agency is doing its mission, make sure that it's run in a way that is financially feasible, financially stable. And it also sets policy. The interesting thing about this commission is that it actually does hire and or fire the executive director, which is unusual compared to some other commissions that we have in Oregon. Commissioners serve at the pleasure of the governor. The governor recommends, the Senate appoints, and yeah, I've been on the commission formally now, I think 3 days, and I haven't even. Our first meeting is a little bit later, but it's an honor to serve. I didn't think I would do this. The former governor, Kitzhaber, asked me if I would consider this, and I said as long as it doesn't interfere with my other work on the Klamath and other things. And then the current governor asked me if I would continue on and do this, and you know, I believe in public service. I think this is it's an honor to be asked to do it, and I'll see if I can't lend a hand to fixing a upset.
I want to get into the problems there. How long is your term?
4 years.
4 years. And some other gentlemen were elected at the same time. So how big is the commission?
It's a 7-member commission. It is 1 commissioner for every congressional district, and then 2 at large.
2 at large.
Yeah.
All right. You're taking over an agency that's admittedly $30 million upside down. A lot of reasons for that. One is maybe people aren't buying as many fishing, hunting licenses as they have in the past. And yet, you've said it's the crown jewel, one of the crown jewels of the state. Where do you start fixing a problem that big?
Well, it's systematic. The issue with the agency is just like most of state government. You run on a panic. You don't run on a plan. And so a lot of these agencies, and Fish and Wildlife being one of them, they're just trying to get the legislature out of session, get their budget passed, and then breathe a sigh of relief for the next 2 years,
months, yeah.
Right, until the legislature comes back. And what happens is the legislature will oftentimes require an agency to do something that is outside of their mission, and so they have to spend money on that. There's lawsuits. I don't know where all the bodies are buried yet, but I would say that you've got an agency. In this case, something I care and think a lot about. This particular agency is based like on a house of cards, like a lot of them are. And so you have this broad mission to fish and wildlife, and yet you only have so many members of the population of Oregon, under 4 million people, that actually participate in funding the agency. So Measure 5 was passed, and so now most of this agency is funded purely off of fees that it gets from hunting and fishing license. And yet people that don't buy hunting and fishing license, who like to look at birds, for instance, have a huge demand on the agency. So you've got this population that's supporting it, and it's twice as big, it's half the size of the actual constituency of Fish and Wildlife. And then the other thing that you add on to the fact is that baby boomers came from quite a few kids. They had less children, and then people my age got married later and had even fewer children. So what has happened is you have this bubble, this funding bubble of people who are baby boomers who prop up the entire agency, mostly men, and that number is dwindling. So you've got this cycle of People are complaining that there's not enough fish. People are complaining that there's not enough birds or wildlife. Fewer and fewer kids are going fishing. Fewer and fewer women are getting involved. And so you have a dwindling population base with an overgrowing abundance of demand. So it's going to be, I told the governors, I said, look, I'm privileged, I'm happy to do it, but I'm not a rubber stamp. I mean, if you want me to fix something, I'll fix it. Just give me the tools to do it.
How big of a budget is it?
It depends. I should know. I should be able to recite that quickly, but I believe we're over 300 million.
So there's some things in there you could cut.
Don't quote me on that. I've only been at it 3 days.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
And yet, Oregon has some really great plans in the fishing and wildlife areas of dealing with species that are growing and populating again. The rivers, some of them are improving. There's some good things there.
There's a lot of good things. And there's also, I mean, I'm privileged enough to travel around the world and chase things that have fins and feathers. And there's no other state like Oregon. Oregon's the very best. I mean, we're better than Alaska. In Alaska, you can't, abundance of fish, but you can't fish every, year round. Here in Oregon, you can fish 12 months of the year. I love Montana, but half those fish on the other side of the Continental Divide swim towards the Mississippi, which makes them kind of weird. We have migratory fish that Montana will never have. I mean, we are truly one of the crown jewels of the hunting and fishing community in the entire globe. We're better than Washington State. We have more access to Washington State. We have more abundance of fish and wildlife with fewer people compared to California. I mean, we really are the very best. And we have huge things that face this agency. We have an endangered species called the California sea lion that goes after another endangered species called the salmon in the Columbia River. So you've got this huge, massive population of sea lions who are eating our other endangered species. So if you shoot a sea lion, PETA goes crazy, and if you don't return enough fish, then the fish guys get very upset. So there's a balance that is out of balance. There's huge problems with goose. The Canadian geese used to fly past Oregon and go all the way to Mexico. Now they've got to Oregon and go, hey, it's pretty nice. And they destroy agricultural crops. And you've got a lot of out of balance issues you have to work on. And you're in a terrible political environment where everything you do is suspect. So, I'm actually giving you the reasons for me not to do this job, but it's too late now. I'm signed up.
How's our wildlife condition?
Depends on what species you look at. I mean, I think overall, this agency does a very good job of managing wildlife. If you right here in Southern Oregon, in one of my favorite places in the Klamath Canyon, there was just 3 breeding pair of bighorn sheep reintroduced after 100 years of not being there. You have tremendous growth in the turkey population, as we see here. But then you have issues like on elk habitat, where you have wonderfully managed state and wonderfully managed private forests and not very well managed federal forests. So federal forests are managed by lawsuit, ours are managed by a different ethic. And so we have a thinner forestry than the federal forests. So you have a lot of these wildlife that are moving off of federal ground onto private ground, and that creates contention. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Well, pretty exciting. Congratulations. We'll see after your first meeting if you're still taking in oxygen, trying to figure out how to fix a $30 million problem, but it should be a pretty good challenge. And how often do you guys meet?
I don't know. A very good friend of mine is the chair of the commission, Mike Finley, who I would only hope to have a quarter of his knowledge a decade from now. I mean, he's just one of the world's best at this type of work, and he sets the parameters. I would imagine that just me having been on the Senate Rules Committee for 14 years and having carried all the current commissioners or current members of the commission on the Senate floor, having relationships with all of them, and knowing them, I think we were going to have a really activist commission and probably meet informally more than we meet formally. I think they'll get a lot of good stuff done.
All right, take your commissioner hat off, put your filmmaker hat on. We're going to talk about River Between Us with Senator Jason Atkinson when we come back. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and Jason Atkinson's with us today, and former state senator, and just recently appointed to the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission. And also, when he's not doing that, he's making films. But you've been in the process for quite a few years, making a film that was debuted at the Ashland Film Festival several weeks ago, entitled A River Between Us. A fascinating film, to say the least, and coming back to Ashland.
Yeah.
When? This week or next?
The 29th it'll play.
That's
and
this Friday.
It'll play in Ashland for a week,
Okay.
and then it's going to play in Klamath Falls for a week after that. So,
well, I
it'll
would
be great.
encourage you, if you haven't seen it and you're over in Ashland, go to the Varsity and check it out starting Friday for a week, all next week, called A River Between Us. Started out kind of interesting and ended up very interesting. What motivated you to do this?
Well, the motivation of the film certainly is because politics has failed. It failed a place that I care a lot about. It's failed a tremendous amount of people in various communities. Various communities along this forgotten place that they've been abandoned really for 100 years, and I really don't like when my friends get treated poorly. So. 20 years of doing this politically, this time I decided, one of those critical moments in your life, do you really believe in something? You're going to do it, or are you going to coast? And so I decided I was going to really do it, so I put everything on hold, made this film, and we've already gone around failed politics. The film, we didn't plan on it debuting in Ashland. It did. Mm-hmm. It's already done quite a few festivals. It plays in Chicago at the Justice Film Festival, and then it goes east. And then it'll eventually go to probably broadcast and electronic. The Ashland and Klamath Falls screenings, as we're doing this festival rollout, which is a lot of fun and doing really well. We did work with some of our partners in the festival world and with some of our folks in distribution to make sure it was okay to run it locally. Because I think there's an element of this film that I think is healing, and that's the portion of the film that I think is important for a local audience in Jackson and Klamath County to see just how much bigger the story really is.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to do, a friend of mine is trying to set up a pastor screening in Klamath Falls, which I think would be great. I think people have no idea the size, the scope, the shape, the texture of this story that that we live right next to.
And the question comes out of this: can fishermen and tribes and farmers and power companies and miners and citizens all get along after decades of failed policy?
Yeah, I think there's certainly the element of what happens, are you going to live in this super partisan world where if somebody doesn't agree 100% with you, then they're evil? Yeah. That's the world that we live on. If you look on any other news outlet, that's the issue. The issue is, are you Republican enough? Are you an environmentalist enough? And if you're not 100% with me, then you're evil. Yeah. And that's really what we live in today, and which is tragic, sad, obviously. Yeah. However, what happens if you actually live the Beatitudes? Well, if you live the Beatitudes, there's a huge shot of humility that comes into, are you brave enough to do that? First of all, you have to be brave. Second of all, you have to be humble. And then thirdly, you actually have to be a servant. So what if you've been trained for 4 generations to hate somebody, and you decide, and you're praying for victory over the people that you've been trained to hate, and then all of a sudden you have this epiphany one day and you go, well, hey, wait a minute. I'm actually supposed to love the people that I hate, even though they're not 100% with me. Are you brave enough to do it? And so when you start to tell that side of the story, Very quickly, it becomes not about the Klamath River. It becomes not about cowboys or Indians or fish. It becomes much more human. And that's why I think this film's biggest support so far, as it's been rolling out, is on the East Coast. People who can't find this place on a map love the story because of the story. People here, it's interesting, people who watch it here still have a lot of bad reaction to even the idea of a film. My biggest critics, there's critics all over, and I get all this hate mail, all this garbage, have never seen it. They're just offended that I would take on the idea of the story. But as you've seen with the film, the film is so much bigger than...
Yeah. We got a little spot, just about a 60-second spot of what the film is about. And again, it'll be, again, available for you to see in Southern Oregon starting the 29th, which is this Friday, at the Ashland Varsity, and we'll run for a week, and then the following week after that, it goes to Klamath Falls. But let me run for you now this 60-second promo on the film.
The Klamath River Basin stands to become the largest river restoration project in United States history.
The debate up here is over what has been a free resource, water.
Anybody who's involved in water issues has received death threats.
There are communities hanging on by a thread.
The federal government put them up the river, and they created this whole community based on water, and that's a high desert.
A dozen different ways to make power, but there's only one Klamath River, and there's only one salmon run that God made.
You're praying for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You're not praying for the right thing.
I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Fix this issue.
A lot of people think that some of these issues are just unsolvable. There's nothing we can do about it. We can.
Well, there you go. Largest restoration project in the United States history. Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big statement.
Yeah, it is a big statement, and it's a big story. I mean, for the last 10 years, the biggest thing considered was whether or not Bristol Bay in Alaska was going to be mined by an out-of-country company. Mm-hmm. Before that, the largest thing was Yosemite and the fires, and before that, arguably, the largest thing was the Everglades. Mm. And so a friend of mine who's in the film, Mike Finley, I asked him, I was like, so let's go over size, scope, complications, political, history, the whole thing. What's bigger? And what's bigger than the Everglades? What's bigger than Yellowstone? What's bigger than Pebble Mine? And it's the Klamath. The Klamath is such a big, big project, a big, big story. It's so close to us, we don't see it.
All the ingredients to start this restoration project are on the table. Mm-hmm. To the point where even the polarization you talked about earlier now has at least gotten to the point where you can talk and communicate. I mean, it seems to me the door may be opening. The
door is completely open, but there's a real lack of political bravery right now, which, you know, again, film will lead culture, politics will respond to culture. Mm. So, you know, I'm not frustrated by that necessarily. Mm. But yeah, all the ingredients are on the table right now. In fact, a lot of the opposition in the last for the last decade has fallen. You've got major natural resource groups that have always been vehemently opposed to any type of talk of compromise, now are supporting these agreements. So there's always going to be people on the right and on the left opposed. You actually have environmental groups in Portland that are opposed to dam removal because it's not 100%. And you've got people on one side that's, you know, it's a slippery slope. If you remove a dam, you're caving into a bunch of hippies, and, you know, you're going to come after another dam later. What's lost in all that is the truth that these dams have nothing to do with irrigation, don't really create power, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, this is America. Why would we let the facts get involved with politics? So we're going around all that and not telling a political story, but telling a human story.
The alternative, if you don't come together, what happens?
Well, it's a huge missed opportunity. I think, there's these times in American history that you're giving an opportunity to do something big, and it's always on the cusp whether or not it happens. If you read the old Kennedy book, Profiles in Courage, Profiles in Courage is not about, there's no chapter on somebody that went along with a group. That's not what a profile in courage is. It's somebody that does the right thing regardless of the cost. And I think those times come up in our history. I think in this instance, if we fail, I think we fail a generation of people. I think we fail to heal some really broken communities and some really broken people. And lastly, we let the bad side of our nature win. And I can't find a time in American history where when we let the bad side of culture win, there was ever a positive outcome. So, failure is really not an option. I think we're going to get this thing completed. I think there's always going to be controversy. I think there's always going to be rock throwers. But I think at the end of the day, when the film is fully executed and all the political work behind the film, I think we'll be hugely successful, and I think that people who know what we're doing, people that know the larger story behind the story, I think you're going to see this model duplicated around the country. We've got interest from, I think, Thailand, some folks in Africa, certainly on the East Coast that see, again, couldn't find this place on a map, but are interested in, well, how did you guys do this? I thought water's supposed to divide us. And so now we live in a drought. Now the parasites are back, probably going to have another fish kill. And yet these people are still together. How does that happen? Well, we know how that happens. So let's show the world.
You've had one of two emotions at the end of the film. Either people are crying or a standing O.
Yeah.
Did you expect that?
No, I'm always shocked if somebody likes it. I mean, I've watched it too many times. I'm always shocked if somebody likes it. We showed last week, we had a festival screening in Portland, and it was to an audience of not Republicans. It was a sold out, it was full. It did very, very well. And the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. And people are not responding to fish, and they're not responding to politics. They're just not. The audience doesn't, they're burned out. Yeah, they're responding to people.
I'm trying to talk about the film without giving it away, because there's another element that has nothing to do with dams, water, fish, but the Beatitudes, as you would say.
Right.
And two groups of people in particular came together with about 40 years of division.
By
the way, your film brought that together. I mean, it was the making of your film that brought those two groups together.
Well, I don't think take credit for any part. I think the real bravery is when you see people like Greg Addington and Steve Kandra, and you see statesman-like behavior by Chairman Don Gentry, and you see tribal folks from the lower part of the river bringing salmon to a conservative community in Merrill, Oregon. I mean, who would have thought? I mean, there's always a period of discovery when you do these things anyhow, but I mean, in my very best day of writing, I couldn't have forecasted that so much of this film, and I won't give it away, pivots around a potato festival on a very small little town. But it does. I mean, and it really is true. Congress completely failed, and our neighbors in the viewing area of theDove, our neighbors figured it out. And that's a lesson for everybody.
All right, it's going to be shown again starting this Friday, the 29th, and it'll air for a week there at the Varsity. Is there one showing a day? Do you know what that is?
It's on the website.
Okay.
We've got a website. It'll be on there. We've got a Facebook page. I think we'll run the spot here.
Okay.
I should know.
Okay, then the following week it'll be over in Klamath Falls. And but again, check it out. It's called River Between Us. You can certainly look that up on Facebook, or look it up for the website, and check out the showings at the Varsity coming up starting Friday. Well, congratulations again from there to Chicago, New York, and around. The movie's making the tracks.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll see what happens. All right, thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.